being paid $1 a night. So I think we have Sue back on the line. Can you hear us now, Sue?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi.
Hey, we were just speaking about how articulate your writing is. Wanted to understand, you're obviously an educated person. Why did you get involved in prostitution, and what moved you to launch this blog?
Well, what I call the blog is Nairobi Nights, a diary of Kenyan prostitute trying to build a brand. And why I'm blogging is because I really, at some point, wanted to see how I could engage an audience of what we, I think on the street we refer to them as regular people. You know, your quote-unquote normal members of your community, women who you expect to go to church and to be active and to find in the market. And when people think of sex workers, they think of us differently. You think of a woman in the streets scantily dressed and bad makeup. So I just wanted to bring together the experiences that I've had in my work with my society and my community, and just to show that I'm not particularly different from anyone else. And you're right, I do have a relatively good education, and I've had more or less the same opportunities as many people.
Sue, I'm sorry, we've got an interesting question coming in online. Ahmed, could you share?
Yeah, we have a question coming from Yal Bash on Twitter. They're curious to know whether you would be willing to pay taxes in case the government legalized your trade.
I would, absolutely. I pay taxes for my roads. I pay taxes when I go to the store to buy groceries. I would be willing to pay taxes, yes, sir.
Okay, now, Sue, there's some interesting questions that I think come up with this issue of legalization, and we want to come back to them again. But so, Jillian, you're obviously hearing something that we wouldn't normally catch. What's your take on this whole idea of an empowered, educated woman pursuing this particular path?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I'm intrigued. As you mentioned, you've got a lot of women who are forced into this around the world, but then on the other hand, you do have a lot of people who choose the profession, and I think that, you know, we tend to view that other side of prostitution, but really we should be viewing the whole picture and realizing that for many, this is a choice.
Absolutely. So we're going to continue this conversation. Sue, I'm going to ask for you to hold for us. For our audience that's joining us on television, unfortunately, that's the end of our TV time with you. However, we will be continuing this conversation online. We're looking forward to talking to you. Join us at stream.aljazeera.com. You can also tweet us at AJStream. We will see you online. Hey, welcome back. This is the Post Show. We're going to continue our conversation with Sue. She's a sex worker in Nairobi. She has a blog called Nairobi Nights. She's giving us the inside scoop on what it's like to be in her profession, and we want to continue a little bit more with us. Sue, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Sue, so, you know, one of the things we're just talking about is, and Jillian made the great point, that sometimes we think of prostitution in terms of poverty, but it's also a choice. What led you to make this particular choice, and how do you feel it's you know, have been the rewards and the risks with it?
I don't see the rewards and risks within my job as any different from any other woman working in Nairobi. I don't see a significant difference apart from the fact that a lot of people would not have chosen this path. I was lucky enough to have been raised in a way that was open-minded, and I was allowed the opportunity to pursue a different way to make my living, because we all have to make a living, and it was a way that was efficient for me.
Now,
I managed to live a relatively good life.
Now, you mentioned the way that you were raised. Like, is your family aware of what you do?
No, for the most part they aren't. Some members are. I was raised in your typical African home, a Christian household, and I doubt that anybody would have expected me to go down this way, to go down this path.
Sue, before our TV portion of the program ended, we asked you about legalization, and you said you would be willing. However, on April, I'm just curious if you could elaborate a little bit about this, because on April 28th, you wrote a blog post actually about the issue of legalization and about joining the system.
Yes.
You said that as the activists put it, legalization means freedom in capital letters. It means the end to police and city council askari harassment. But then you say, at the face of it, legalization seems like the best thing that can happen to our industry, what with us being treated with dignity and all. However, in your opinion, as you said, the obvious advantages of legalization are insignificant as compared to the disadvantages. So what are some of those disadvantages?
The main disadvantages, I think, of formalizing the industry would be that the costs would be high, would become higher. We manage within our industry to separate different levels of sex work so that it's a service that's affordable to just about any client base. And I consider myself a member of the service industry. I like to please my clients. So that's one of the main things that it will be. I think it would lead to a black market demand for prostitution because of the rise in cost. But on the other hand, I'm happy to pay tax, and I think it will make the streets much safer for many girls who are in the same situation, for many sex workers. But also it will make sure that, for example, we talked about 12-year-old girls. We will make sure that girls like that will be able to be back in school, and they won't necessarily be allowed to engage in such practices, because I don't think it's right for children.
So how do you think about risks such as HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases?
Hello? Sorry.
I was asking about how do you consider the risk of HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases?
I think the risks are significant. And no matter if you're having commercial sex or you're in a relationship, those are risks that you assume as soon as you become sexually active.
Okay, so now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Sorry,
Sue.
and yes, and I think a significant function of my blog is bringing sexuality to the forefront and making us more open about towards talking about issues of using protection, condoms, and HIV testing, because this is obviously a significant part of our generation's experience, sexual experience.
Julian, this is
in Africa especially, we are blighted by the possibility of infection. Every day I go to work, this is something I think about.
Jillian, this is interesting because basically we think a lot of times about something like the sex trade, and we're like, yo, this is problematic morally, health-wise, right, etc. But she's raising the point that through her own raising of her voice through her blog, she's creating a dialogue.
Yeah.
How do you balance that issue? I mean, maybe is raising a dialogue a helpful way towards coming to more healthy sexual relationships, as well as dealing with some of these public health concerns?
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting question. I'm actually I'm really curious to ask, if I might, how many of your readers are coming from within Kenya?
I think a vast majority of my readers. I have had a good bit of interest from overseas, but a lot of them and a lot of the people who respond to the blog are Kenyan, people who quite likely I have passed on the street, people who grew up in the same society as me.
Sue, one of the comments on your blog from Easy right here is one of the users. I'm not sure if you've read this one. Says that he's now a bit disappointed, he or she. What started off as a fun blog is slowly turning into what seems more and more like a philosophical tool. What would you say to that?
Well, like I said at the beginning, the first thing, and that's why I state very clearly at the byline of Nairobi Nights is that I'm building a brand, and the initial stage of building a brand, as far as I remember, is establishing a fan count. And the next stage is engagement. So I'm at the point, and my blog is mature enough that I want to challenge negative stereotypes, but at the same time challenge the so-called politically correct narratives that we insist on in talking about sexuality and sex work. There's a lot of myths going around.
There's some really interesting questions that are coming to us online too, and we want to present a few more of them to you. Ahmed has got some stuff that's coming in via Twitter.
A lot of them are actually about your kind of motivations or your consciousness to get into this line of work. And Johnny Brave is asking whether, he says, did Sue get into her line of work as a long-term goal, or was it a temporary plan that is extended over time? Because I've read in your blog you suggest that you might eventually come out, so to speak, to your parents and stop doing this.
Yes, I engaged. I entered the industry temporarily. I thought this is just going to be a thing that will get me out of bad situation. But having worked over the years, I consider it to be a very reliable source of income, and I'm a professional, so I carry myself with pride, and I consider my clients with care. But in the long term, it's like, say for example, models in the modeling industry. There's an expiry date. There's a limit to how popular I will be in the future. There's a limit to what sort of clients I'll be able to draw. So I have to think about retirement at some point.
So
like
what do you aspire to do in the future?
Well, I've set myself on this path as a writer, so I might proceed with that.
Okay.
But a more practical option, I think, would be, given the experience that I have gained in the sex work industry, is possibly a venture into sexual rights, or a venture into guiding younger girls in terms of just encouraging girls to express their sexuality in positive ways. So I reckon I could lean towards the role of a human rights defender of some sort, a human rights activist on the periphery.
Sue, thank you so much for joining us. You're the author of the Nairobi Nights blog. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us and elucidate more about your experiences. We appreciate it.